think I'd like to buy the business from the family. Okay, go ahead, go and write your proposal. So, my goodness, my mother had said, go do this. I then went to my oldest sister that same day and said, I spoke to Mum, I'm going to put a proposal to the family. Okay, it'll take me some time together to put all this together, but I'll get it done. Then I went to the middle sister, same thing, conversation, and then the youngest of the three sisters. And so they all were in line with my thinking. And over the next 6 months, I worked with the family accountants and some lawyers, and I put a proposal together. So this proposal, I handed it to the family, Mum first, and then each sister in age, succession. And we had a meeting, so I handed the document on a Friday to my sisters and my mother, and they all had the whole weekend to talk to me. On the Monday morning, we met in our accountant's boardroom, my three sisters, their husbands, my mother, my stepfather, my wife and me. And it's like, oh my God, there's a wall of people in here, but I know them all and I should be able to get along with them. And I spoke to the proposal and I said, there's three options here, I'm after number one. And after a 3.5-hour conversation, I walked out of that room owning the business. I actually was able to own the business. But if you can imagine standing in that room to speak to the paper that I'd put forward, I said to my mother, you've always wanted us to be equal. Bearing in mind that all of us are different ages, different genders, having different life experience. What I tried to do in this paper, I tried to make it fair. So my mother took that on board, and it took us 3.5 hours to come up to the agreement phase. But I walked out of that room letting go of other family wealth and taking on the family business. But I can honestly say to you that first time the family came together, after that meeting for a dinner, the elephant had left the room. There was no reason for an argument. There was no stress about how the family was going to continue. It was mind-blowing for me and really made a fundamental change to our whole family dynamic. So strangely enough, I started to get more involved with families in business, and friends of mine would come up to me afterwards and say, how did you do that? How did you buy the business from the family and remain friends with your family? I couldn't quite put it into words. So the more I read, the more I saw other experts that were coming over from the United States. I was talking with them, I was meeting with them. I started to learn. And the family business dynamic is a really interesting one. So it's become my life journey. So what is a family business? Has anybody got a definition in the room of what they would call a family business? Would anyone like to just try and say what they think a family business is? Because in my mind, it used to be just mum and dad and the kids. It's not just mum and dad and the kids. It is, but it isn't. And if we want to go to, I've heard 16 different definitions. I'm told there's 26. But there's one that I use that I believe is the accepted one today. And that is, if two or more members of the same family are in strategic control of the family business. Strategic control of the family business. So that doesn't mean they have to be working in there day to day. So what do I mean? Peugeot, car business. Family members own 35% of the shares. They have control of the board. It's a family business. Murdoch, Lindsay Fox, Frank Lowy. Those are family businesses. So that's my definition of family business, and that's the one I've worked with for years. So, If you see one family business, you've only ever seen one family business. Every time I go and work with families in business, I find they are different. If I had 6 retail shoe shops side by side and they were all selling the same shoes, their systems might be different, their staff might be different, their back office might be different, their storage might be different, their suppliers might be different. There's so many variables just in that little example. And then when we start to talk about families being in business, if there's more than 2 people involved, then I've got so many different people's headspace. And we're all individuals when it comes down to it, so a lot of the time we're thinking about me. And if you're in the family business, as I was, and I'm the youngest, and Dad dies, but I'm the only boy, my culture and my background says, well, it should be mine. Shouldn't it? So it's a challenging question. I can see some nods and some smiles in the room. It's a really challenging thing when you start to think about the cultural background of individuals and families, the income structures, when people marry, what happens in the dynamic when people marry, sometimes when they divorce. So when we talk about seeing one family business, you've seen one family business. The topic that I'm talking about today of nuances in family business is really important, because a nuance is a shade or a tone or a hint or a fine distinction of something. So when I go into families who are working together, when they are in business, I'm forever seeing nuances. Everywhere. So how many people in here today have worked in a family business? So you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, that's quite a few people of you. How many of you in your practices work with family businesses? Okay. How many of you understand the dynamics of the family stuff that's happening inside those businesses you work for? Some of them, yeah. Because it's an interesting relationship being the accountant to the family, because really, are you the accountant to the family or the principal of the family? The person who hires you. There's a relationship here where somebody is paying the bill, and who is that somebody? Because they're the person that you have the relationship with. So it's incumbent upon you to understand what that individual that's directing you as the client is giving you direction. But then it challenges you if that person has younger children, other family members that are outside, brothers, sisters, aunties, uncles that might be working in the business. So it's really easy to stay inside the bubble of working of the family business, the going concern, the entity, and look after the individuals by direction from one person. Yeah? Make sense? Okay, good. So all families are different. You're different, I'm different, mum and dad are different, the kids are different. So our thoughts and our ideas and their thoughts and their ideas are also always different. There's no way you can be sitting in the same chair as the person next to you and actually become one. So here's my conversation about the nuances. You've got a family and you've got a business. Is it really family business? I change the wording around a little bit. I say we're actually a family in business. And then I can work with people. Then I can say to you, okay, what's more important, family or business? And I know you're going to laugh, there are some people that say business. The reality is, it is a family in business. The business is started or continued because that is the wealth generator for the family. That is the tool. You understand this. I know you understand that the business is the generation of the wealth. And we work hard at making these people earn their money and make their money and keep their money, because that's what we want to do. It's the way we have a great relationship with each other. So there's a system at play. We've got a family system, we've got a business system, and then there's actually the ownership system. What do I mean by ownership? Well, have I explained family simply? You're all kind of comfortable with that, and business, we're all comfortable with that. Ownership. If I said to you, where do the shares that mum and dad own, where do they sit in there? Do they sit in the family one or the business circle? They don't sit in either, because it's not something that mum or dad actually, it's not part of their physiology. It's something else, and it's something that we want to talk about that's separate to mum and dad and separate to the business. So if mum and dad have got investments, a holiday home, a boat, shares, other business interests, I put all of that in the ownership circle. And then I can have a separate talk about all of that other stuff over there. Because I can talk about the business, profit and loss, systems, processes. I can talk about the family, mum, dad, the kids, what are we trying to do? But if I talk about what you own, it's a different set of circumstances. It's a different feel. So really, here we go. Now it starts to get interesting. It's not so simple. It's really not so simple. In just these three circles, the way I've put them together here, can you see the lines from each of the four perspectives? Yeah? So you've got family members who own shares, but they're not in the business. And you've got family members who work in the business but don't own shares. You've got family members who work in the business and own shares. And you've got non-family members who own shares and work in the business. I didn't think there were that many possibilities. But it does cause a problem when you want to start talking about it. There's other things that can happen here. If I say that dad is head of the family and dad is also head of the business, yeah? And dad has ownership. He owns all the shares. That's really simple. But depending on his emotional state the day he rocks up to work and he's got to make a lot of decisions during the day, okay? If he's got to buy a $2 million piece of machinery, is his headspace thinking about putting bread and butter on the table for the kids? Or what sort of investment am I going to make? Is it a 10-year investment or whatever? Or am I actually looking at signing over to the bank my home to make sure I can keep the business going? Because I know that if the business is making $2 million profit and I want that money out as a distribution, and I've got headspace on what space am I thinking about? Do I want to keep the money in the business to grow the business? Or do I pull the money out of the business so that I can have a holiday? Buy the investment property, buy the shares. Let's say, for example, it's mum who's a director of the business, doesn't work in the business. So mum's here. Mum's also a director and a shareholder. So her issue is, it may be, if the business makes $2 million and the $2 million comes out for distribution, then there's a conversation, well, she's conflicted. Does she want that to be invested outside, or does she want it to come down to do the renovation on the house? all of these decisions, all of these challenges are impacting on the business that we work with and the family that we work with. So depending on not just the dynamic of the business operation, but depending on the dynamic of the family, we can have really big, challenging issues. So I don't know whether you all remember Len Buckridge and the family structure that he had, but the reason that things started to go off plan after he passed is even though he had a fantastic will, all of those people reverted to type and said, what about me? Even to the point where I think a couple of the daughters put a claim in just because they didn't want to get left out and miss out. So we've got this complication thing here. Another complication we strike in this spot is when we talk, when we talk about the business, most people when they put together a business plan, you work with businesses, we do strategic plans, goes for 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, 5 years, and we keep revisiting it every 6 months, every 12 months, well you should. We'll do budgets, we'll come back to those budgets. But a business is forever evolving, especially in the environment we're in today. So mostly we're working on timeframes in business that are 12 months, if I average it. Is that a fair comment? Yeah? 12 months. Fair enough, okay. How long does a family go for? It's blood. It's forever. You have your mother, she's the same mother, hasn't been any different, you won't have another mother. Huh? It's just the way it is. Family's forever. You can say, don't want to see you anymore, but the fact is, they're still blood, they're still your family. So family's forever, business is for 1 year. When I talk about ownership, you guys deal with estate planners. When they start talking about investments, what sort of timeframes do they talk about? Medium term. Medium long term. What does medium long term mean? 7, 10, 15 years. So we have here forever, 1 year, right? And 7 to 10 years. 3 totally different perspectives. So here's Dad in each of these 3 spaces. He's thinking short term, medium term and long term. He's got decisions to make, investment decisions about the day-to-day of the business. He's thinking about the family and he's thinking about how do I make these decisions? Where does it all come? And I'm just talking about Dad. What about the kids that are working in the business? And there could be 2, 3 and 4. I'm working with a family business right now, Mum and Dad, 4 daughters, 4 sons-in-law, okay? And about 2.5 years ago, something in the family side of things went pear-shaped. And now, and they've been working, 2 of the daughters, 1 of the sons-in-law working in the business, with Mum and Dad also working in the business. And they've been working for 2.5, 3 years with this really angry, heavy, fearful thing going on, and nobody's willing to talk about it. What's happened to the business? It's one of these horrible places where I brought these people together, and for the first time in 3 years, the whole family came into one room for a conversation. That conversation went for 6.5 hours. We actually made some really good progress on the family side. Because until I get the family side sorted out, I can't go anywhere near the business. The family dynamics are really, really, really important. So, what are the differences between a family business and a non-family business? Some really simple stuff here. Primary intent of a family business is to nurture. If we want our kids to come into the business, we want to actually help them grow. We want to nurture them. We want them to be young adults. We want them to take responsibility for themselves. And if we can help them, what a great thing makes us feel good, makes them feel good. We want to develop self-esteem. Our young kids, they grow up, We want to help them in their lives. So it's a really great opportunity. And we want to grow these young kids as adults. We actually know that we can make a difference to them because we're close. We've helped them. But I can tell you, it's documented proof that in the first 0 to 8 years as mum and dad, you are the bee's knees for your children. From 8 to 15, 16, they're learning from their teachers at school, strange as it may seem, but they're actually, the children believe that the teachers are finally smarter than their parents. It's not always true, but they have the knowledge that the kids want to learn. And from the time they're about 15, 16 to about 24, 25, who are they learning from? Their mates. It's their mates, it's their peer group, because they can't go outside that peer group. You're not going to go up to your mate at 23 years old and mum told me I should do it this way because that's the right way to do it. It doesn't go down very well. So knowing that these children, and we're trying to develop them and grow them, right, it's really a safe place to be if we do it properly. And we can do it properly. There is best practice in this now. The other things about families in business, we base a lot of the stuff, the smaller family businesses that haven't really grown into professionalising their stuff, having processes and procedures in place, they really do have, and even when they do have processes and procedures in place, emotions get in the way. Goodness gracious me. If I've seen a sister press a button on another sister in a workplace, it just bang, and we've got an argument. It's just amazing. We know our buttons. Your kids know your buttons, and their siblings know their buttons, and we play with them all the time. I've got to tell you, some days I walk in, I feel like I've just got buttons on me, and I know that when I walk over there, my wife's going to say, oh, look, I'm all fingers. Right? It happens that way. Sometimes families work that way. Inward orientation, what do I mean by that? So here we are, we're a family. We're in this room. The people next door have no idea what's going on in here. And we don't want to tell them. We're very secretive. We want to keep things here. And in a family business, it's our IP. We do it different to everybody else. We don't want them to know how to do it because we know better. We're actually better than them, but shh, don't tell anybody. It's our secret. So we focus, and we tend to focus in a family business inwardly until we grow, until we're generations down the track and we've learned that by professionalising we can improve the business and we can have structures in the business and we can learn to look outside for new opportunities. Little change. Mum's always mum, dad's always dad, the boss is always the boss. What changes? Sometimes the clients will change and sometimes the suppliers will change. But we stay in the same place. We don't move. The systems are the same. It's really hard at the moment. A lot of families are struggling with technology. They can't find the right software. What do we buy with accounting software? My old Solution 6, that's old, sorry. Xero, QuickBooks. Yeah, there's so many. And then you go and everything's got to be added on. You can't buy one simple system anymore. What Dad says goes, or whoever the boss is. That's the way it is, my way or the highway. It's very different from a non-family business. Non-family businesses' focus is profit. Why? Because we have to return value to the shareholders. If I've got a board, and the board is actually thinking strategically, managing risk, we're out to make profit. And that's the reason we are here. And a little bit about developing skills is the larger corporates will have staff and they want the best staff they can get. They always want the best staff they can get. And they're prepared to upskill that staff. They really are committed to upskilling their staff because they want the best. Value for money. I'll pay this much, I'll get the right person, they will do the job for me. And if they can't, they're gone. You've got a window of opportunity as a staff member in a public company. And it's got to be both ways. You've got to get value for your doing the time that you do. But developing skills, very, very focused on the non-family business side. Yeah, we want to educate, but we want to educate you such that you will be a better person. It's a very different focus. And here's the non-family business trait. They focus on facts. I don't want to know how you feel about something. Tell me what the customer is going to do. What are the facts? I need to deal and make a decision. I want to know what the return on investment is, what capital we're going to invest, who are the suppliers of the products. I need to deal with the facts. Not because you like this fella, you met him at the pub and you shook hands and yeah, we agreed and yeah, we're going forward with that and I don't know how much it's going to cost, but it's okay, Dad, we're fine. It doesn't work that way. And things are constantly changing in the larger enterprises. There's constant change. Restructuring, people coming, people going. And you won't take a direction from somebody that has no relationship with you, no direct reporting. You know, it's this whole thing about conditional acceptance. If the boss came down to you tomorrow and said, come on, I think you need to go and move over there, change your position in the office. I think it's going to be better for everybody. Why? You actually have the opportunity to ask the question, but you're not just going to do it because it was said so. So this is a really fundamental stuff, but when you're dealing with families who are in business, it gets really fine-tuned. You have to know each individual family member and how they're thinking when they're interacting with other family members on a day-to-day basis. They need to be focused on the same vision as what the owner or the leader of that business is doing. So, my goodness. So let's have a little bit of fun. Okay, I'm going to get you all to just pull out a pencil. I'm going to read a question. There's 5 questions here. And the answers are very simple. I'm going to ask you a question about your family, and it's either 1 for never, 2 for hardly ever, 3 for some of the time, 4 for almost always, and 5 for always. Okay? So the first question, and this is for you only. This is not, you don't have to share this with anybody next to you. This is just for you, and this is something I will do with a family, with each individual family member when I go into work with them, because it helps me get a picture, and it's only that. It's only a momentary snapshot of somebody's headspace at a moment in time. So the first question is, you're satisfied that you can rely on or depend on your family for help when something is troubling you. So if you always know that you can depend on your family, it's a 5. If you can't depend on your family, it's a 1. So the next question is, you're satisfied with the way your family discusses things with you and shares problems with you. Yep. The third question is, you're satisfied that your family accepts and supports your wishes to take on new activities or directions. And the fourth question is, you're satisfied with the way your family expresses affection and responds to your emotions, such as anger, sorrow, or love. And the last one is, you're satisfied with the way your family and you spend time together. Everybody starting to shake in their bones a bit, might reveal something. Okay, really simply, if you got 17 to 25, everybody got 17 to 25? Yep. Can I get a show of hands? A bit of a feel? Yeah. You guys are fine. It's all good. If you get somewhere between 11 and 17, I really can't make a decision on that. I need more information. It's not a good thing, it's not a bad thing, it's just the way your family is right now. And if you want to improve upon it, if you want to improve your relationship with your family, just think about the questions and maybe catch up with somebody. Have a meal with somebody. Have a chat with somebody. Yeah? But if you're under 11, and I doubt there would be anybody in the room under 11, I would start seeking some help, because there's some fundamental issues between you and your family right now. And it's just a right now, and it may be just your headspace and your perception of where you are, because it may not be that way at all, because I'd have to find out from the rest of the family.
John, it might also be whether you're thinking about your immediate family, like you and your relationship with your children, or you and your relationship with your siblings. And
100%.
Yeah.
Totally correct.
Or whether you're lumping everybody together and thinking of it as a whole.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing that you say. In this particular picture, the way I've shown the 3 circles, I've been talking about mum and dad and the kids. But as time goes on, it starts out as just mum and dad, or maybe. It then grows to mum and dad and the kids. But then the kids meet partners, and then we get in-laws. So what would happen with in-laws, if I go back to the circles here, I draw a dotted line around family. There'd be a dotted line around there. And then I could imprint where that in-law would sit, because they could be ownership and family, they could be in the business and family, or they could just be in the family. But until I get a real picture of who's who in the zoo, I can't see it. And although they're 3 individual systems, in reality, it's one big system. And a lot of these lines, the edges of the circle, if I call them barriers, some are pervious and some are impervious. And for different reasons. So where am I? No, that's backwards. Okay, so I'll give you one quick case study about how a family business wasn't a family business at the beginning and became one. 2 young men worked in a corporate world, wanted to start a business together, and they decided, yep, now's the time, let's put equal money in and we'll go and buy this particular business. And they did. And they did quite well. And really amazing job. But then one day, one of the 2 partners fell in love with the other guy's sister. Not wife. Some of the headspace went wife, but no. Fell in love with the other guy's sister. And they married. And all of a sudden, it became a family business. Because, the dynamics changed. And half of the problem was the 2 partners had agreed that one was going to go overseas to do some work with his wife and travel. Fantastic. While they were overseas travelling, the business was going through a tough time. And the individual running the business didn't have much cash flow. And the fellow who was overseas was actually doing quite well in his interests overseas. He says, don't worry, I'll send you some money. So he sent money. So all of a sudden the partnership went from 50-50 and became lopsided. No agreements, no documentation, no discussion about it, just here's the money. The travelling couple returned to Australia, and the 2 men have gone back to business together. And the wife, whose money is, the additional money is in the business, is saying, when can I get it back? I want to do the renovation on the house. And my goodness, these 2 partners started to lose communication. They didn't know how to approach each other and have a conversation. So I got involved. I was invited in, and we had a sit-down conversation for a few hours. And it was challenging because everybody was not wanting to upset anybody else. And they didn't want to speak about the elephant that was sitting under the table about the money. So we talked about values and we talked about culture and where you came from and how you joined the family. And at the end of it, I said, in the big issue, we're about 5 minutes from the end of our meeting, and I said, so the big question really is here today, how's the money going to get paid back and when? Goodness gracious me, you could have heard a pin drop around that table. And it was really amazing because I walked out. That was the end of the meeting. And, you know, I came back 2 weeks later and they said, you really made us think. I didn't know whether to jump up and scream or hit you or hit the other person or complain. But you know what it did do? I actually spoke to my business partner about it. And the two wives actually had a conversation about it in between me meeting, because I just left it in the air, but so loud and so big, they had nowhere to run. They knew they had to address it. That was me playing in this particular case. It was a one-off situation, quite unique. And there are other situations where I've been invited into families and the dynamic of the family has been so strongly held for such a long period of time, the younger generation has battled to be heard. And how they rely on each other, those dynamics make it really hard. So I've got many, many, many more case studies, but I won't go there. So the last thing I would like to share with you is some tools that I use. Well, one tool. You've seen the slide that I had you have a little play with. That's something that I do use when I meet with families because it gives me a picture of where they're at. But there's a product, a software product called Keynote, and I use this quite extensively. It helps me find out who's who in the zoo, what they're doing, what their history is both medically as well as physically as well as mentally. So if there's addiction in the family, if they have cultural differences between in-laws, families, when people meet, I track down as much information as I can. And I will go back as far as I can in the history of the family, because I've seen repetition where great-great-grandfather Jack was a drunk. So granddad John, he was a drunk. And then dad became a drunk. So it's kind of likely that it could be repetitious. But there are other things that I track as well, and there are conversations and family dynamics that all fall into that. So Keynote is a tool that I use when I work with families. And I've read a lot of books, and these are some of the books that I've read. The one from the Family Firm Institute is a phenomenal resource. I think you might, I'm not sure whether it's available on Amazon, but I know you can get it from the Family Firm Institute. They will send it out. Entitled Brat, or Contributing Leader, that's an interesting little storybook. And it challenges the high net worth families about their children and how they're brought up. Most of them end up feeling entitled these days. And the last one is probably, it feels like you're reading a fiction book, but there's a fair bit of advice and suggestions in the glossary at the back. So I can recommend that one. There's no wrong answers in dealing with families in business. Really what I'm out to achieve is that the families actually continue to grow and stay together. That's where my heart is with all of this. And I ended up doing it because it worked for me and people started asking me about it. So I really do enjoy it. I enjoy working with families in business. Thank you.